Hello, y'all. I wanted to make a video and a history video because I know some of y'all may not be into it, but I do want to make some history videos now. Like, it's just something I'm interested. Um, but I wanted to make a series called What If? No, not What If. That time when. That time when. Oh my goodness. But that time when, and this one, I just did by the title, is that time when a president broke history. And as you can see on the screen, it is FDR because FDR, or his full legal name, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, broke history on when, in November of 1940, he was elected to a third term, the only time that has ever happened. Now, his Republican challenger, because I do want to kind of take it in chronological order, but like the opposite of normal, like from election day back to the beginning, kind of. In for a second, in a way to be like in October, in September, in November, like before the election, like a month or two before the election, I don't believe his Republican challenger was polling well. It was polling better than the previous Republican challengers, like Herbert Hoover, especially in 1932, and the other guy in 1936. I think it was Landon, Wolf Landon, or Alf Landon, something like that, in 1936. But in 1940, um, he was polling better, and he did better. I think he did better than his 1936 counterpart, but um he did not win, obviously. But I do think that I have opinions about that will go off later, but what was the 1940 presidential campaign like? Mainly the big issues were all about, well, there was a part of it that was like World War II has started, which I personally believe he won because of World War II and all of the stuff that he had done, for the Great, like, to, in his brain, help get out of the Great Depression, even though it really didn't do much. But yeah, it was mainly him being like, "Oh my goodness, we gave y'all so much programs and welfare programs," and also the famous saying of "Don't like switch horses midstream." So yeah, that's what he did. And the Republican challenger, Wendell Wilkie, is I think who he was. Well, I was saying Wilkie, Mr. Wilkie. I think he supported a lot of the New Deal, which is a stupid ass thing that the Republicans did. Like, I'm sorry, but oh, I'm sorry for cursing. Oh my goodness. But the Republicans in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s, and basically since the 30s up until the 80s, so basically the 30s to the 70s, the Republicans were like Democrat light on certain issues. Like, when Wilkie supported the New Deal in a lot of its ways, he didn't support, obviously. I don't believe Wilkie wanted to go into the war. I think he was anti-intervention. FDR, I think, also posed as anti-intervention, and then we got in there only 8 or so months, 7 or 8 months after he was inaugurated. But um, or no, that's when Pearl Harbor happened. And Pearl Harbor, I understand actually, because if America got bombed, we're going to retaliate. That's how nations work. But anyways, point is, 1940 campaign was mainly just FDR and then FDR light. That's how I see it. The Republican, just like the Republicans in 1936, 1940, 1944, they all and even in 1948, because Thomas Dewey in 1948, he ran. He was a New York Republican. He was a liberal Republican. He was like, we did not. I say we because I am a center right person. I would consider myself a center right populist type person. So yeah, I'm biased, but the I'm not. I'm gonna try and give as least opinion on FDR and his administration as I can, and just say facts that the Republican Party between the 1930s and the 1970s was basically just the Democrats' light because they supported the New Deal, they supported civil rights, they supported civil rights before the Democrats, but we're not going to talk about that. Yeah, they supported the civil rights legislations. Nixon supported and founded the EPA, which is something that the Democrats probably would have done with their environmental stuff in the 70s. They What else would they have done? They did the Nixon continued the Vietnam War, which the Democrats, as we can tell by especially LBJ, I think it was JFK who started the Vietnam War or started ramping up, like slightly increasing over his administration, but his administration obviously ended before before his first term. But I do know that LBJ, I think it went from like 50,000 Americans in Vietnam in 1963 to like 800,000, over 800,000 in 1969, which is why I'm like, that's just amazing. That's amazing. It's not actually amazing, that's sarcastic, but still, like, point is, the, like, that time when FDR in 1940 broke history by running for a third term. And there was, by the way, there was a lot of, and I think this was after he had already said that he wanted to expand the court, like the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court said that some of his New Deal legislation was unconstitutional because it was. And so then he was like, oh, we're going to, like, he supported expanding the Supreme Court. But I don't believe the Senate supported it. So that's because of a bunch of conservatives in the South, conservative Democrats in the South, and the Republicans, obviously, in the North didn't support it. So he had really only Northern Democrats who supported it, which was not enough to get the majorities needed. But anyways, anything else? Oh, so in the nomination, like, okay, rewinding to the nomination process, in 1940, I thought for the longest time that FDR only ran in 1940 because of World War II. And so he was like, okay, I thought, my naive self, thought that he just was, so selfless. And that he ran in 1940 because he saw World War II and he knew that we were going to, that we probably would intervene in World War II, and he didn't want to have to, brief a new administration on all of that. So I thought, okay, he ran in 1940 and 1944 because he was like, we're gonna get in World War II, and then eventually we are in World War II, and I don't want to brief the new administration with information, But no, I then realized now he was just he didn't want to relinquish the presidency because his vice president before Truman, I believe, was a conservative Democrat from the South, and he didn't want the conservative Democrats to win in 1940 because if they won in 1940, then he thought that they would, at the very least, stop his agenda and stop the New Deal legislation, which he, just couldn't live with, apparently. Or even reverse some of it. So that's why I'm like, also a big thing to note is that while FDR was president, there was multiple anti-lynching bills that the northern people tried, like the northern Congress people tried to introduce, and every time he would veto it. He vetoed at least 2, if not more than 2, anti-lynching bills because he wanted the Southern conservative South, no, the conservative Southern Democrats like votes, and he wanted their support, like enough of their support. So, because without their support, his New Deal legislation wouldn't pass because the Republicans wouldn't support it. It's like the whole thing. So he thought New Deal legislation was better than racism, basically, and being against racism. So I just wanted to say that. I know that's biased but that's not even biased. That's just a fact. But I brought it up because even independents, like, it's not even Democrats who love FDR, it's also independents. And FDR is ranked really high in the number of presidents, and we need to go back and realize he wasn't as good of a president as we all think. But anyways, 1940, when he was in the nomination process, right? He said right after 1936, because apparently it was customary at the time for after a second term when the president would be asked on whether they would not run for whether they would run for a third term or not. And FDR supposedly was asked that many times by the press and never gave a direct answer, never said yes or no. So that's nice. And so then it didn't come as a shock when he said, "Oh, I'm gonna run for re-election." Love that. Anyways, then basically and also by the time of I think it was 1937 is when there was kind of a panic, and because I think after 1932, 1933 was like the deepest part of the Depression. It was the worst part of the Depression, and then so from 1933 to 1936, I think it was like we were getting better slowly over time, and then in 1937, I think is when the effect of his policies were really hitting the economy hard. But yeah, basically that's gonna be this video. I just want to do a brief overview of, like, very brief, oh my goodness, and a very brief overview of the 1940 election and that time when a president broke history. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.